diamond, my friends, weighs 1.33 pounds. And it was discovered in a mine in South Africa. And the headquarters who owned that mine lived in London. And so the problem existed of how they're going to get to this most expensive diamond in the world from South Africa to London. And so they hired the detectives from London to come down and escort this diamond. So these dozen or so detectives never left that diamond from when it left South Africa to the time it reached the office in London. And when it reached the office in London, they all gathered around as they opened up this very well-packaged box, opened it up, and it was empty. It was empty. 2 days later, the Hope diamond arrived safely in London's office via regular postal service. Isn't that amazing? True story. That diamond, my friends, had 3,106 carats. The article said, it was talking about how you could just imagine how 1 carat is. And I thought, I have no idea what 1 carat is. It's probably a good thing, my friends. But 3,106 carats was the size of that diamond. And it was sent via postal service. Isn't that amazing? And that's exactly how God came to this earth. No fanfare, regular postal service, my friends, like everyone else. And really less than all of us. In a manger, right? In a manger. There was an interesting story her name was Vicky. She had 3 boys under 5. And she had finally gotten 3 boys to bed. It was about 10 o'clock or so, and she said, the past week with the 3 boys has been crazy. She said, if you could have just bottled that energy of those 3, she said she could have made millions. And I thought, my parents were here at the earlier Mass. There's 24 over at the rectory now, my friends. There's some of them are going home, but at least 15 tonight. We have 6 boys in my family. My poor mom. But my friends, the oldest name was Jared, 5 years old. And she was sitting, the husband was up in the bedroom doing something, and she was finally relaxing after wrapping and doing all this stuff in the kitchen, having a cup of tea. And all of a sudden she hears this, oh my, one of them are up, is going down the steps. And so she stuck her head around, and of course from where she was sitting in the kitchen, he couldn't see where she was at. And he went into the place where the Christmas tree was, all the gifts, and they had a beautiful nativity there as well. And he had a piece of paper in his hand, this little 5-year-old boy. Takes the piece of paper, then he proceeds to kneel in front of this nativity. And he says out loud, and the mom is listening to this conversation in the other room, "See, Jesus, I drew this picture for you," he said. And then he said, on the left side, that's me. On the right side, that's you. He said, in the middle is my heart. And then he said, I'm giving it to you. Stays there for a few seconds, gets up, takes his piece of paper, puts it on the Christmas tree, and says, Merry Christmas, Jesus. And off to bed. Off to bed. The mother, with tears in her eyes, thinking, he raised so much havoc the past week, this 5-year-old boy, and then he ends up teaching the true meaning of Christmas. In the middle is my heart. I'm giving it to you. It's amazing how our God responds to that type of language, my friends, and that type of prayer. It's amazing how he responds to that sincerity. As any human being would, right? That simple language speaks to our hearts, my friends. When we're speaking to each other, when we speak in that language, Very clear, very sincere, very simple. How profound it is. And when we pray like that, it gets amazing blessings in our life. Amazing blessings in our life. There was a priest setting up for Christmas Eve. It was in the late morning, very bitter, cold day, and out in front of the church was a bus stop. And he noticed a rather poor woman that was all bundled up, waiting for the bus. And he said he knew that the bus wasn't going to come for another half an hour. So he said, you know, ma'am, that bus isn't going to come for another half an hour. Why don't you wait in the church and then go out in 20 minutes, and this way you don't have to stand out here that freezing cold, of which she did. So she was obviously Catholic. She came into the church and she came right up and sat in the front pew there and prayed. And he, meanwhile, was working in Northex. What happened was, because of the cold weather, it burst one of the pipes in Northex and it dripped into the drywall. And so they had to cut a hole. And there was this big, huge, gaping hole in the Northex. And he wanted to cover that up for Christmas masses. So his wife, who went to an auction 2 weeks before this, bought this beautiful tablecloth for like $6.50. Beautiful. It had lace on it and then some gold fringe and things like that. And he's fixing all that up, and all of a sudden the woman comes out and she said, "Where did you get that?" And she said, "Well, my wife bought this at this auction." And she looks at it, and she looks at it real closely, and she's looking at the corner of it, and she said, "I made that." And the priest said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, I made that." She said, "I was living in Austria with my husband, and my husband was a very outspoken critic of the Nazi regime. This was in the 1930s, and in 1938 it started escalating. Of course, Hitler and the Nazis started arresting the Jewish people in 38, and so they knew they had to get out. So they said, so the husband said to the wife, "Look, we need to go to Switzerland, but we can't go together. You leave first, and then I'll follow behind." Of which they did. She left, and she made it safely to Switzerland, and she never saw her husband ever again. She heard that he was arrested and died in a concentration camp. The priest offered the tablecloth to her, and he said, no. She said, "I don't live in this part of the town, but I came to interview for a nanny position right down the street." And she told the priest who that couple was, and the priest knew who the couple was, and she thanked the priest, and off she went. Then the priest had this mass, midnight mass, and all the people were, we greeted the people, and then he got cleaned up, and when he went back to the Northex, there was a man standing there looking at this tablecloth. And the priest came up to him, and the man said to him, "Father, where did you get this tablecloth?" And he said, "My wife bought this at an auction." He said, "Father, at the beginning of Advent, I started coming back to church." He said, "I was a very devout Catholic my whole life." He said, "Then I was forced to leave Austria." And he said, "I had so much bitterness and anger over the Nazis and what they did." He said, "That poison inside of me was killing me." He said, "I needed to get rid of it." He said, "What happened was I used to collect manger scenes. And I was reading an article on the manger, like this beautiful manger. And he said, the article talked about how, as beautiful as mangers are, the real thing is receiving communion. We touched the manger, this article said, but communion brings our God within us." So he ended up going to confession sometime during Advent, and he wanted to receive communion during the Christmas Mass, of which he did. When he received communion, he prayed a simple little prayer. He said, "Lord, you led me back to you. Lead me back to my wife." He said, Lord, you led me back to you. Now lead me back to my wife. There was a long pause, and then he said to Father, Father, I need to go. He said, she made that tablecloth, and she's my wife. The priest, as he was leaving, pulled him back. He said, sir, I know I can find out where your wife is. So he called that couple that interviewed, and of course they gave the phone number and the address. And on Christmas early evening, they knocked on the door of that apartment. And for the past 10 years, they've never seen or heard from each other. We're now united. Both left Austria, and how they ended up in a small town in America is beyond miraculous, my friends. Truly a miracle. And a simple little prayer, Lord, you led me back to you. Now lead me back to my wife. There was no room in the inn, my friends, 2,000 years ago. Will Jesus find a room in your heart and in mine? God bless you.